Good morning. My name is Mary Louise Porter. My pronouns are she and her, and I will be delivering the sermon for today. However, this sermon was originally written by Reverend Dr. Sandra Fees. For over 20 years, Reverend Fees has served UU congregations in Harrisburg and Reading, Pennsylvania, where she is a minister emerita. She also facilitates small online soul matter groups, including creativity matters and practice matters. She is a poet and has a passion for yoga, reading novels, and walks in nature. And this is her sermon. There is a Hopi proverb that says, "Those who tell the stories rule the world." This proverb reminds us that stories matter. Each of us needs to be a part of storytelling. The stories that are told, the stories that are not told, who tells them, and who doesn't get to tell their stories matters. Stories shape our understanding of who we are and of the world around us. When I was in school, I read William Faulkner's novel, The Sound and the Fury. I knew when I read the novel that I was reading something quite remarkable. I'd never read anything like it. The novel begins with a chapter written from the perspective of Benji, who is a 33-year-old who is cognitively disabled. To read a whole chapter of a novel written from this perspective was challenging and eye-opening for me as a young person. I had not thought what it might be like to see the world through the eyes of someone with an intellectual disability. Faulkner was known for telling stories from the perspective of multiple characters. He also narrated events of chronological order and used stream of consciousness. He was doing this in the early 20th century, long before this approach became popular. Today, it is not so unusual to encounter multiple narrators or streams of consciousness in novels, movies, and television. Many of us have come to expect to hear stories from various points of view. These multiple perspectives celebrate our common humanity and our unique cultures and experiences. Now, an encounter with someone who looks at a particular issue differently from me is a reminder that it's not a single way to understand a situation or experience. Even a family dinner where a family story is told reveals that there are many ways to tell that story, and that each family member has a slightly or sometimes extravagantly varied version. Some versions are more factual than others. But to ask whose version of a family story is factually true may not be the most helpful place to focus attention. Our experiences are not merely a string of facts. They aren't a math problem with right and wrong answers. Instead, experience is deeply impacted by our feelings, thoughts, previous experiences, partial understandings, memory, beliefs, cultural differences, developmental stages of life, age, and gender, among other factors. To insist on a single story or a right story means that accounts that don't fit the dominant narrative don't get told. Or at least, those stories don't get much attention, or they don't have as much influence. Now this morning, I want to share a few stories about how it came to be dangerous to insist on a single story. The first one comes from the novelist Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She gives us a talk titled, "The Danger of a Single Story." In it, she describes how she came to see that people's lives and cultures are composed of many overlapping stories, not just a single story. She experiences herself from the perspective of having a single story imposed on her, and also from the perspective of having imposed a single story on others. Adichie is Nigerian. She grew up in a middle-class family. Her father was a professor and her mother an administrator. As a child, her family had live-in domestic help. When she was 8, they got a new houseboy. Her mother used to tell her that the houseboy's family was very poor. They would send his family yams, rice, and old clothes. She felt pity for them. Then, one day, they went to his village. There, the boy's mother showed them a beautiful patterned basket his brother had made. She was stunned. It hadn't occurred to her that they could make anything. She had a single story of them as poor, and that image was a dehumanizing one. She never forgot that experience. She came to the U.S. at the age of 19 to go to the university. When she met her American roommate, the roommate's first comment was, "You speak English perfectly. How did you learn to speak it so well?" Well, English is the official language of Nigeria. Then her roommate asked to listen to her tribal music and was disappointed when she shared Myra Carey. Her roommate was astonished to know that she used a stove. Adichie was the recipient of what she describes as her roommate's patronizing, well-meaning pity. Her roommate had a single story of Africa, and that story was dehumanizing. Adichie says, "The consequence of a single story is this: it robs people of dignity. It makes our recognition of equal humanity difficult. It emphasizes how we are different rather than how we are similar. Stories matter. Many stories matter. Stories have been used to dispose and to malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanize. Stories can break the dignity of people, but can also repair that broken dignity. The danger of a single story also impacts our religious community. This is the second story I would like to share. In a preliminary report on class in Unitarian Universalist, it identifies the following as a common story. UUs are upper middle class, financially comfortable, highly educated, articulate, independent, socially responsible, liberal, and tending toward human theology. Now, I won't ask for a show of hands, but I wonder, do any of you feel left out in this story? I could spend the rest of the day teasing apart all the difficulties with this single story, and there are many. But let's just focus on education for a moment. The findings of more recent surveys offer a different story from the one commonly told. A 2014 survey, already 10 years old, shows that 29% of Unitarian Universalists have a high school education or less. 32% have gone to college. For those who are doing the math, this is more than half who have not completed college. 22% graduated from college, and 18% did postgraduate work. When Unitarian Universalists are described with broad strokes as highly educated, those who do not fit into this single story are made invisible. The effect is to privilege the experience of those who have more formal education. It is to disempower those who have less formal education. The story leaves out the experiences and insights of many of our congregations. It leaves out stories that may help us move beyond an outworn image of who we are as a religion and towards a fuller recognition of our educational diversity. A third story, one that gets told nationally, is that the United States is a Christian nation. That narrative has consequences. It privileges Christian values and the Christian religion. The Christian nation myth is a way to delegitimize the experiences, values, and voices of those in this country who are not Christian. It places indigenous religions, atheism, Judaism, Islam, and other religious beliefs and groups on the edges, including those members of the Unitarian Universalist congregation who are not Christian. Alternatively, to acknowledge that we live in a religiously pluralistic America made up of many religious stories is to acknowledge the validity of many religions. This view cedes power and influence to non-Christian perspectives. We can see the way this is playing out. As the country grows increasingly pluralistic in its faith perspectives, responses to this diversity are varied. Non-Christian religions are sometimes celebrated, sometimes ignored, and sometimes demonized by the dominant culture. A plurality of religious stories can be threatening to the claim of Christian morality and tradition as the one story. This month, as we reflect on the practice of story, I invite you to consider the dangers of a single story. I encourage you to listen to the stories that are being told, to listen for the stories that are not being told, and to notice the stories that are actively being suppressed. Looking around our religious community, our nation, and our globe, we do well to ask, who is profiting from the single story? Who profits from the way things are? Am I unintentionally privileging a single story that marginalizes others or even marginalizes my own experience? The writer Ursula K. Le Guin notes that storytelling is dangerous to those who profit from the way things are because it has the power to show that the way things are is not permanent, not universal, not necessary. Having that real, though limited, power to put established institutions into question, i.e. storytelling, has also the responsibility of power. The storyteller is the truth teller. Humans are storytellers. We are all storytellers. Our stories speak our truths. They matter. Ensuring that a variety of stories are told matters. What does it mean to practice story? To engage the practice of story is to tell stories, to encourage one another to tell our stories, and to listen to our stories. It means recognizing the power of storytelling and the danger of a single story in order to cultivate stories as a pathway to hope and healing, compassion and dignity, and empowerment and connection. May we be attentive to the diversity of stories in the sacred web of life. Stories matter. Amen. Blessed be. And could we now turn to our next hymn, which is hymn number 293 in the gray hymnal, O Star of Truth.